Good afternoon, all. Welcome to this press conference launching a new report by the Egyptian Human Rights Forum, an independent human rights NGO. The report details transnational repression and targeting of Egyptians abroad by the Egyptian authorities. You can find a QR code linking to the report online in the flyers, which are available at different points in this room. My name is Leslie Pikmal. I'm the Egypt researcher at the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies, another organization, and I'll be moderating today. I'd like to stress the importance of tackling the growing issue of transnational repression, or TNR, with documentation, thorough documentation like this report, to shed light on the facts, on the evolving trends and practices, in order to feed EU and member states' policy responses with data-driven analysis and recommendations. Egypt is one of the top 10 perpetrators of TNR worldwide. And though the EU has recently chosen to pursue rapprochement and support for the Egyptian authorities, it is important that human rights violations, both inside the country and also targeting its citizens abroad, continue to be highlighted and hopefully better addressed. I must recall once again that civil society organizations like ourselves appreciate the European Parliament's record of engagement on human rights in Egypt, and also its attention to the issue of transnational repression at large. Without further ado, I will introduce each of our speakers in turn when giving them the floor, and then we'll open up for questions. First, MEP Chloé Ridel, member of the European Parliament from the Socialists and Democrats group, who has led parliamentary work on transnational repression targeting human rights defenders. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, no, I thought you wanted to start maybe on the Egyptian situation more particularly, so I can jump on this. I don't know.
I spoke with Mayan that you would like to be early, so that's why we arranged it.
Okay. Well, then I will talk without knowing precisely what is the situation, in Egypt that you will describe. But I was the rapporteur for the European Parliament on a report on transnational repression. This was adopted at the end of November 2025, and this was the first report of the European Parliament on transnational repression. Before, our Parliament never expressed itself on this issue, which is a growing problem, as you know, around the world. And we now have, thanks to this report, a definition of what transnational repression is. There is no definition in EU law so far. And we have a plan, a strategy to tackle transnational repression that we submitted to European institutions and member states, that was adopted by a very broad majority of the European Parliament, except from the far-right groups. So this is a solid base on which we can, build to have a truly effective European strategy to tackle transnational repression. So we defined transnational repression as attacks and threats by states or their proxies that aim to silence dissidents beyond their borders, including through harassment, digital surveillance, abuse of legal instruments, such as Interpol red notices, for instance, coercion of family members, and sometimes physical violence and murder on European soil. This is a growing trend, transnational repression, that is the reflection of the growing authoritarianism around the world, right? And we know that it is also a concentrated phenomenon. You have to know that 80% of transnational repression facts are made by only 10 states around the world. And those states are China, Russia, Iran, Belarus, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, I do it from memory, and Egypt and Turkey. So Egypt is one of the main perpetrators of transnational repression. So we looked at it precisely, and I can, for instance, we didn't put any specific case in the report, because otherwise it would have been, endless. But also, as far as Egypt is concerned, we have the case of the journalist Basma Mostafa, who was arrested 3 times in Egypt before going into exile in 2020, and who continues to be the victims of threats from the Egyptian regime. So in this report, we affirmed that it was in the European interest to protect those human rights defenders or dissidents seeking asylum on the European soil, because we have to protect those voices who often are free voices, and one of the last free voices of their society, and it is in our interest to protect their freedom of speech in Europe, so that to show to Egyptian people, to the Russian people, to the Belarusian people, that Europe protects human rights defenders from their country and their freedom. We have a lot of human rights defenders that are refugees in Europe, and it's not acceptable that they are being threatened on our soil. It is a matter of sovereignty for the European Union. So in the report, we make a lot of recommendations for a true European strategy. We first need to collect data on transnational repression, because we don't have any data. Police services don't collect any data on transnational repression. And for my report, I had to rely on data from the United States, from an NGO called Freedom House. This is the only NGO who collects broadly and at the level of the world data on transnational repression. We need to train our police services also on the issue, and we need to coordinate the policy response and to broaden the mandate, for instance, of Europol, the European agency in charge of police, who doesn't have in its mandate the fight against transnational repression. We need to also regulate the market of spyware. We know that now transnational repression uses spyware a lot. Okay, so you can be spied on your phone, on all your devices without even knowing it. And spyware are produced even in Europe by companies in Europe. We have to prevent that our European companies export spyware technologies to authoritarian regime, because they are going to use after this kind of technologies against us. So we have to regulate this market and ban the export of spyware to, for instance, Egypt. It's not possible to do that anymore. We also need to regulate Interpol red notices, because a lot of abuses are going on under these red notices, who are supposed to target terrorists, huge criminals, and who are often used by authoritarian regime to target human rights defenders. For instance, Azerbaijan has issued 200 Interpol red notices against human rights defenders from Azerbaijan who are refugees in Europe. And then, on the basis of these red notices, European countries arrest some of those human rights defenders by mistake. Okay, so we need to regulate. And in the report, I make the recommendation that not only member states, of course, in the end, they will be the one who are going to execute those red notices, but Europol should give an advice whether or not this is an abuse, red notices, for instance. And we issued various recommendations for sanction of countries committed transnational repression, etc., extending the program protectdefenders.eu, who is supposed to protect human rights defenders around the world. And when it comes to Egypt, we noticed that Egyptian authorities systematically used the refusal or non-renewal of passports to exert some pressure on dissidents abroad and to pressure families that remain in Egypt. So concretely, in this case, Europe could provide support in line with the EU Family Reunification Directive. or could issue more swiftly humanitarian visas to a human rights defender and dissident. So we should accelerate this policy. And I will stop here, not to be too long, but we really need a true European strategy in that matter. We don't have any European strategy regarding transnational repression, and we need member states also to take that into account, that this is a growing phenomenon and that this is a matter of freedom, but also of European sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to zoom in on the Egyptian Human Rights Forum report with Moataz Fegiery, Vice President of EuroMed Rights and President of the Egyptian Human Rights Forum.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to present the finding of this report on behalf of the Egyptian Human Rights Forum. So this is a comprehensive report to provide discussion and assessment of the state of transnational repression practiced by Egypt, supported by empirical data, and I will show later on the methodology that is used in this report. Egyptian Human Rights Forum work on transnational repression as an emerging trend started in 2024. This is the second report. We published the first report in 2024. This report is more comprehensive and it adopts a more broad methodology combining qualitative and quantitative analysis. Our work actually that was published in 2024 contributed to the debate within EU institutions and the UN human rights institutions with regard to transnational repression. We were happy that our report also was cited by European Parliament report on this phenomena and also by the resolution that was released in late 2025. This phenomena actually, as I said, it is a systematic one that has been practiced and furthered by the Egyptian government over the last few years. Those of you who follow the situation of human rights in Egypt has some kind of information on the crisis of the human rights movement, the pressure that has been practiced on human rights defenders and the human rights movement, independent media, since 2014. This crisis, which I consider existential crisis, led many activists and organizations to leave the country, forming a diasporic community that is very active in Europe and the United States and some countries in the Middle East and North Africa, including Turkey, Qatar, Tunisia, Morocco. And the human rights movement outside Egypt launched also peaceful resistance using different platforms in Europe and the United Nations and the African Commission to raise public awareness on the situation of human rights in the country. But the government started to apply the tactic of transnational repression, and it is an irony that since 2022, when the government launched some what we consider cosmetic and limited reform initiatives such as national dialogue, this phenomenon has increased. So this is a contradiction. So the government inside Egypt wanted to market this reform internationally, and this reform actually were praised also by the European Union recently. But at the same time, the attack against human rights defenders and peaceful dissent continued and increased, as we will show in the finding of this report. You know, on 25th of October 2025, President Sisi came here to Brussels, and the first ever Egypt-EU summit was held here, celebrating the strategic partnership with Egypt and also launching the macrofinance assistance to Egypt. But it is unfortunate that less attention has been given to the situation of human rights defenders and independent activism in the country, including the phenomena of transnational repression. So the methodology of this report, as I said, is a hybrid mixed methodology, qualitative and quantitative methodology. We established a survey. We received responses from 34 persons, And we also conducted semi-structured interviews with 10 victims to collect their testimonies. And we established a database that included 84 entries. And my colleague will show this database in details, which provides some analysis of the trends and where they are committed also, which countries, and the scale of their perpetration. So violation documented occurred in different geographical locations, mostly in Turkey, Egypt, UK, Sudan, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Netherlands, Austria, Tunisia, France, Qatar, Lebanon, and Bahrain. So we see here that some of the violation against defenders committed on European territories, which also raise the question on how some government feel empowered enough and not deterred to follow and impose restrictions on activists who are living actually in democratic countries in Europe. So the major finding of this report and the first conclusion is that we are confronting a system of repression. So it is not individual or random cases. It is not individual cases. It is a system of repression, which, as I said, increased significantly since 2022. This system of repression orchestrated by some tools and tactics. These tools and tactics, they are interconnected. They serve each other. So some of the violation or some of the victims, actually, they are suffering from different pattern of violation. The first tactic, which is arbitrary denial of basic documents and consular services. And this is really something that has been used systematically in Europe, in United States, in Canada, in countries of the Gulf, in the Arab countries, that activists are not able to renew or receive their passport, their document of identification, including birth certificates. Some of the victims of this trend, even children and the newborn babies who are not able to receive, their parents are not able to receive their birth certificate. So it's a tool used by the government, first of all, to displace those people from Egypt, so they will not return to Egypt, or they will have to return and they are arrested once they go back. They have to maybe seek asylum in any countries. But some of those activists who live in countries where there is no legal framework for refugees or asylum, they are suffering more, and they turn into stateless status. So those who are in Europe, they seek asylum, but those who are living in, for example, Middle East and North Africa, where there is no protection for asylum seekers, they are left in limbo. Second trend is a proxy punishment of activist family members and relatives inside Egypt. And this is also ranked among the mostly used tactic by the government. And it aims to deter activists outside, to spread fear and worry. And of course, some of the people who are living outside, they think twice before joining any movement or political work or media work, because they know that the cost could be high for their family and relatives. The use of counter-terrorism measures designating peaceful activists on terrorist list, and this is also widely used. In absentia convictions and bending charges in politically motivated cases. Some of these convictions could impose life sentence. And some members of the Egyptian Human Rights Forum actually were convicted in absentia, and some of them even face bending charges in cases that they have no idea about it. Physical and digital surveillance against defenders, and some of these incidents happened in European countries, in UK or in Italy, in Belgium. Extradition and deportation from host countries, including the misuse of Interpol mechanism, and also the regional security cooperation between Arab interior ministers. And this is actually less covered phenomena. How Arab government also, they have this bilateral and multilateral security framework, including to counter terrorism. And we have seen the case of Abdurrahman Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who was extradited from Lebanon and is still in forced disappearance in United Arab Emirates since January 2025. The report also highlighted coordination between Egyptian embassies, consulates, and an informal network of pro-government Egyptian expatriate association used in surveillance and intimidation, including physical violence. And we have seen that in recent cases in 2025 in the UK, Netherlands, and in the US. To conclude, the impact of transnational repression is far-reaching, and it has chilling consequences on peaceful activists, journalists, who, as I said, they feel deterred to continue participate in public affairs and to practice the legitimate defense of human rights. My colleague Samar will take you into a detailed discussion of the statistics and the database finding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moataz. And moving to Samar Elhussieny, Director of the Egyptian Human Rights Forum. Thank you.
Oh, good. C'est bon? Okay. Hi. Numbers. Okay. One of the key things that we are doing in this report is actually launching a database that is documenting the different patterns of transnational repression and how the Egyptian regime is systematically doing these violations. We thought about the database to avoid the idea that MEP Chloé Ridel was talking about, which is the lack of data and the lack of evidence in order to document the transnational repression. The thing is, transnational repression, people, when you are inside the country and you're suffering, your suffering is acknowledged. But if you're outside the country, you're supposed to be in the safe haven. So we needed numbers. We needed numbers so we can actually verify and make sure that these violations are well documented. The database that we have prepared has revealed a fascinating element, actually, which is that we are in a hostage situation. Families of defenders, political activists, and journalists who live inside the country are hostages to the Egyptian regime because of their family members' activism in the diaspora. So 73% of the families of human rights defenders and journalists has been subjected to proxy punishment, which means that they are either banned from travel, or they are put on under regular investigations with national security inside the country, or they are arrested and in pre-trial detention for unlimited time that we don't know what are the basis for their accusations. There is also a very recent case of a researcher, Saif al-Islam Eid. His father was detained recently in Egypt because Saif was documenting the violations that is happening inside the prisons in Egypt. Saif lives in Qatar, in Doha. He is a well-known researcher. He does podcast episodes from time to time. And after one episode, his dad was arrested and he was tortured, and right now he is facing charges of being a member of a terrorist group. And the man, who is around 63 years old, was forced to sign different confessions that he doesn't even know what's written in the papers. This is one of the cases. After the incident that happened in Amsterdam, actually in Netherlands, in August 2025, when some Egyptian protesters went to the Egyptian embassy in Amsterdam and tried to protest Egypt's complicity, as they say, in the war on Gaza, these family members of these protesters has been arrested in Egypt. 2 of them are still there, and we have documented in Amsterdam alone around 12 cases of proxy punishment. Families of defenders or activists who got arrested because of their family members' work. Another element that the database has revealed was the bureaucratic erasure, which means that people are denied their right to get any document papers from the embassies or inside the country. This percentage was 76% out of the database, which means it was the highest number in the database. The biggest pattern that we are facing, that the defenders in the diaspora are facing, is the provision of consular services, because of the fact that either the embassies inside the country does not provide the documents, or any kind of document, not only the identity documents, any kind of documents, if we can say. And they also don't provide inside the country any papers. So even if a family member of me wants to go and make a passport or an identity document, they can't, because there is a registry blockage, as the data has shown. One of the key things also that we have documented is the usage of the absentia trials, which is 41% of the database, and also the surveillance is around 30% of the database. Surveillance or hacking is sometimes it's attempts, but we have also documented different cases of hacking that already happened and data that was leaked for political activists and for human rights defenders and journalists who are living in the diaspora. Another thing that we have documented also is the implications of these violations. What does it mean? What it means to people who live in the diaspora? Around 52% of the database input decided to either limit their activism or stop it at all, in order to secure and make the lives of their families back home safer. So they either stopped doing any kind of activities, or they lowered it to the minimum so they can actually make their families back home safer. Another thing is 85% of the people are facing legal difficulties regarding movement, regarding registering their children's. For example, if you live in Turkey, if you live in the Gulf, and you want to register a newborn, you have no option but your embassy. And the Egyptian embassy in Turkey and in Gulf, they don't actually provide these documents for newly born kids. So this led to a problem where we have around 75 child in Turkey alone who doesn't have any identity document, who doesn't have any healthcare support, who cannot be enrolled in education because of this deprivation of documents. We have women who are suffering because of the lack of documentations. They can't get a divorce certificate or a marriage certificate if it's matter, and because of that also they are being kept in a very vulnerable situation. Moving from the implications, there is a PDF file that I will be happy to share with all of you also. You will find it from the press release that is in the QR code on the poster card that is outside. But to conclude regarding the recommendations, over the last 2 years we've been trying to communicate with the national entities in order to establish an independent national body or mechanism that will deal with the issues of the Egyptians in the diaspora. This mechanism, we have been promised several times that it might be of an interest. So far, nothing. The second recommendation that we were hoping for in the report is the end the misuse of judicial and security cooperation mechanism. terminate punitive consular practices, such as the deprivation, and provide people with their essential documents, review the terrorism designations lists, cease targeting families and relatives, and release the ones who are arbitrarily detained, engage civil society in shaping policies regarding the dismantling the transnational repression crisis, and to the host countries, and this is what matters more to, while we are here in Brussels, is establishing a dedicated national contact points to receive reports and coordinate with police and legal responses, enhance training for police and prosecutors on the nature and risks of transnational repression, apply strict judicial scrutiny to all extradition requests and politically motivated security warrants, ensure that asylum and nationality procedures are not influenced by these politically motivated warrants, and provide psychological and legal support to victims, activate the target sanctions to regimes that is actually conducting transnational repression practices, and to the UN establishing a dedicated mechanism or a special rapporteur on transnational repression, integrate the phenomena into the universal periodical review, develop a shared international database, support legal protection programs and emergency relocation or shelter initiative for human rights defenders who face transnational repression, and last is strengthening the cooperation among regional human rights mechanisms. Sorry if I talk too much.
Thank you very much. And finally, we'll be zooming out with Alexis Deswaef, the president of the International Federation for Human Rights, the FIDH.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Indeed, I'm representing today the FIDH, the International Federation for Human Rights, which is a federation of 196 human rights organizations in the world. And today, most important, of course, our Egyptian human rights organizations who are member of the FIDH, the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies, and the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights. I would like to thank especially the Egyptian Human Rights Forum and their whole team for this important work with their annual report on transnational repression. It's a very important problematic, and also to bring you all the solidarity of the FIDH, because by editing this report and launching this report today, you put yourself at risk in this transnational repression with the Egyptian authorities. And you could be in danger, and maybe the Egyptian intelligence service is following us online. I say hello, but it's not a reason to start in Brussels transnational repression against the people who dares denouncing this transnational repression. I was in Egypt in June. I have myself experimented the way of working of the Egyptian police and the Egyptian intelligence service when we were participating at the global march to Gaza, while we wanted to reach El Harish, to march to the Rafah border point with Gaza, and that the Egyptian police and intelligence services were executing the dirty work of the Israeli government by targeting these citizens of the world, chasing them till the Suez Canal to push them back violently to Cairo. We know the security services of Egypt. They're also very active abroad, and that's the point of today, to denounce this transnational repression. By targeting individuals outside their territory, the states involved violate the sovereignty of the host countries. So this is a big point for the host countries, that they very often don't want to see. It undermines also international law and compromise fundamental rights like freedom of expression, the right to asylum, and personal security. It impacts exiled communities, encourages self-censorship, and weakens the global civil society. It undermines public debate and democratic institutions, making a collective and coordinated international response absolutely necessary. In recent years, the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders, which is a joint project of the FIDH and OMCT, the World Committee Against Torture, supported numerous individuals affected by transnational repressions. Journalists, human rights defenders, lawyers, whistleblowers abroad are targeted. Egypt stands out as one of the most active countries in transnational repression. It employed tactics like you have explained, such as arresting relatives in the country, in Egypt, blocking exiled media, deploying spyware and denying consular services and identity documents, including, like you've told us, like Samar told us, for children. The Observatory for Protection of Human Rights Defenders, with other organizations, pointed the situation of the journalist Basma Mostafa. She is residing in Germany and has been subjected to threats, surveillance, harassment, gender-based online violence across several countries. These practices, and it's important to denounce it, include using diplomatic missions to repress peaceful protesters and harassing families remaining in Egypt. And even a lot of UN special rapporteurs has made communications about these situations. We know that in the diplomatic missions, and Brussels is the biggest capital in the world with the presence of diplomats, but that includes also the presence of spies, but also of intelligence personnel that is participating in this transnational repression and doing the dirty job outside their home countries. And this is true for the Egyptian embassy in Brussels. When transnational repression occurs, it directly violates or severely restricts fundamental rights. The third states, the host states, Belgium for example, European countries here in the European Union, have the obligation to guarantee the rights of all individuals within their territory and provide effective remedies in case of violations. That's the importance of the recommendations you make in your report. And despite this recognition, governments and regional organizations of the impact of such practices, no country has really developed yet a coordinated response consistent with its international commitments. It's crucial for states to redouble their efforts to address protection gaps, both nationally and globally. These national contact points that you mentioned, for a quick and reactive procedure today, if there is a concrete case, and I speak with my hat as lawyer here in Brussels, defending refugees, recognized refugees, it occurs quite often that people have just to go to the police. The police sometimes doesn't even understand what it is about, don't realize the impact of transnational repression. They think it's common law, that it's an attack or a robbery. They don't realize that it's targeted by the diplomatic missions in the country here. So this contact point is essential, the collaboration between police and a special dedicated prosecutor, because and I speak again as lawyer of refugees. One thing is to recognize to a person, to an individual, the status of refugee. But once this recognition is done, is given, it's also important, of course, to continue this protection, because it's not a point to have the protection if you are in danger in the host country. And that's an obligation of the host country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shall we open the floor now for any questions? Well, perhaps in the absence of any, until someone dares to speak up, perhaps I could abuse my privilege as moderator to ask a question. Actually, I have a lot of questions. Perhaps picking up on the very last point that Alexis mentioned, with regard to the responses by third states, I wondered if first our Egyptian colleagues Moataz and Samar, and also our European colleagues Alexis and Chloé, whether you have noted recently any positive developments in the sense, any good practices by any European states, any notable efforts that you'd like to underline and that we hope others could follow, either because these practices had an effect on state behavior, so either the Egyptian authorities' behavior or others, or because such practices really helped in protecting the victims of TNR. So perhaps starting with Egypt and also more broadly.
Okay. Over the past 2 years, I think there is a growing interest regarding the definition of the phenomena, dealing with it, enlightening people about what is transnational repression itself. It's not a trend. It's not about one case. It's more systematic, as MEP Chloé Ridel was saying regarding the top perpetrators of transnational repressions around the world. Russia, China, Egypt, Turkey, Tajikistan, and others. All these countries has been conducting transnational repression, but it was really hard for victims to articulate what's happening. Right now, at least they know what is the definition of what's happening. We can map the patterns. Internationally, the EU has showed interest. The UN has showed more interest, especially last year with the study that was released from the parliament, and then the resolution. Also, the UN has released last year like a small pamphlet about transnational repression and what it could be and what are the elements. So there is a growing interest on documenting, dealing with the phenomena. In Germany, there was some good practices regarding creating a transnational repression unit, but then the response of the unit, it's there, but the way that they're treating the victims are not as sufficient as it needs to be. There is a lot of space for improvement. The UK also has improved regarding transnational repression, and regarding they did a report last year in the parliament about transnational repression, documenting the different countries that are perpetrating it. So there is the interest. I think we need just to move from the theoretical layground of the transnational repression to the implementation with more points and more, I would say, executive procedures about how to combat it.
Thank you. Perhaps, Chloé, would you have any comments on this?
Yes, I can comment on this. I agree fully with what you said. I think there is a growing interest into the phenomenon, but Europe is still very, very far away from having a genuine policy regarding transnational repression. We can mention the US, for instance, or Australia, who have been since a long time aware of transnational repression. And for instance, in the US, you have the FBI, who has a special unit dedicated to fight transnational repression. We don't have such a thing in Brussels at the European level, but also at the level of each member state. So we are very far away. And there is a need in Europe to protect those defenders. As I said, while I was doing my report, I worked with a lot of NGOs, and I thank those who are around the table, because of course we discussed together in the process of this report. But I met with a lot of activists, for instance, Russian dissident. Okay, those people are of course threatened in their lives, you know. And in Europe, you have more than 90 press, comment on dit, rédaction. I don't know.
Press agencies.
Yeah, media outlets or that fled from Russia, okay, and that continues to operate in the European soil. and continues to speak to the Russian people through platforms like YouTube, for instance. We need to protect those Russian voices because they are the last free Russian voices in the world, right? And those people are not protected by our police services, don't know whether they have spyware on their phones or not. So they need, for instance, to be trained to cybersecurity. They need to be aware of the risks of spywares, how to protect them from them, etc., etc. We need to assist those people. But of course, I speak of Russian dissident, I can speak of Egyptian one, of every Uyghurs, you know, Iran, people from Iran. All those people are being threatened, and with no help at all from European member states or European institutions. So we are very far away, to answer your question boldly, from what we could do to tackle this phenomenon, and we need to stop it. So I hope that now that we have a report, another report from the European Parliament is undergoing. I hope that our institutions and member states are going to take our recommendation on board and finally act. I'm sorry, I will have to leave now. As I said, sorry, but thank you very much for your invitation and for what you are doing.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Just one point, and I speak more as a lawyer in Belgium. Systematically, in cases of transnational repression, it's important to lodge complaints, to go to see the police, to lodge a complaint at the prosecutor's office. First step, to inform the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the host country here in Belgium, so they can send warnings and complaints to the Egyptian embassy or the embassy of the country doing this transnational repression. Also to use the UN tools, special rapporteurs, Human Rights Council. Each case must leave some traces. The answer from the person targeted can be to hide or to self-censorship himself because of fear, which I completely understand. But it's important to react because the reaction can be a protection. Of course, besides all the recommendations you do in the report and the ameliorations that the host countries must implement, like MEP Chloé Ridel told, at European level as well, not only at national level, but it's also important to see a lawyer here in the host countries.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Well, in that case, I'm happy to again abuse my position as moderator with further questions. I wondered actually if you heard anything regarding efforts by the French authorities. So you mentioned that Germany had set up a contact point, but I actually noticed on the French Foreign Affairs Ministry website there's an email address. There's a page saying what is transnational repression in 3 or 4 languages, including Arabic, and there's an email address saying if something of this type happens to you, please email. But this was, as I can see on the modification date of the webpage, it was quite recent, within the last 2 years. Have you heard anything about this new mechanism?
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Some government, yes, including Germany and France, because of the effort of NGOs and the European Parliament, including actually some organizations who are nationals, whose leaders are national of other countries that also impose transnational repression measures. So there is more awareness. But I think right now, what is important at this stage is to take this discussion from the just legal and more generic condemnation to working on individual cases and providing more legal aid and legal assistance and working within European countries to strengthen the protection mechanism. And this is what we plan to do also over the coming month and year, because it's we were very much overwhelmed in the beginning to establish the methodology and also to provide data, because as Chloé said, we lack data, and it is very important to show the level and scale of this phenomenon so we can convince European states and also European Union to take more attention, pay more attention to this phenomenon, maybe also to publish something complementary to the guidelines on human rights defenders, with specifically dedicated to the question of transnational repression.
Yeah, regarding France specifically, I think this is quite recent because last year, for example, and this is more regional, not an Egyptian case, but there was a very flagrant example of transnational repression that happened to one of the family members of a Tunisian opposition figure who was beaten in the streets of Paris. And to be, in fact, I don't think the police forces knew even how to define what's happening to them. So it will go back to what Alexis was saying and what Chloé was saying regarding training for police forces on how to receive the reports itself, how to deal with the victims of transnational repression, because part of the problem that is happening to the victim of transnational repression, there are several layers actually. The first one is comparing their suffering to the suffering of the people inside the country. And then they become a bit shy to talk about it because they feel I'm outside the country, I'm not at risk of being imprisoned, while my friends inside the country are at risk of being imprisoned, so I shouldn't talk much about it. But then the implications that happens to them and their family members kind of push them to talk about it. And when they talk about it, the police forces and the different focal points that should receive the reports and deal with it does not understand the complication of the phenomena. And then we have another issue regarding the judicial cooperation between the different countries, that especially regarding transnational repression, because sometimes the person who committed the Transnational Repression Act could be living in a country and he committed this act in another country. So we need these two countries to collaborate together, which doesn't happen in most of the cases. So there is a lot of, I think, points and layers that should be happening in the upcoming months and the upcoming years regarding dealing with the phenomena. And I think like having reports like what the forum is doing and what others are doing is very important to map the phenomena, map how to combat it. And I hope that this will also encourage other people who are suffering from transnational repression to come out and talk about it more and feel that this is something that they can talk about and they don't need to be shy.
Thank you very much. I was very interested by your recommendations. I think you were a little pressed for time in outlining them, so I'd like to encourage everyone to review the recommendations in the report in detail. But there was one I wanted to hear more about, which is in recommendations to the Egyptian authorities. You mentioned something about a national level mechanism. Could you elaborate, how this would work and what are the chances you think of getting the authorities to set this up, either of you?
Yes, thank you very much. And this is really the recommendations that we have been repeating since the first report that we published in collaboration with the Egyptian Front for Human Rights. We called the Egyptian authorities to establish this national committee, especially because in 2022 there was a presidential pardon committee that examine the cases of prisoners and detainees, but there is less attention given really to the suffering and the situation of human rights defenders and activists in the diaspora. We actually requested that from the National Council for Human Rights. There was effort actually made by one of the leaders of the National Council to establish something or to initiate an initiative, but it was really neglected by the authorities, because one of our demand is that any return for people or any settlement for these cases should not be conditioned, because sometimes there is also intimidation and threats coming from the Egyptian government. Okay, you can come back, we can settle your situation, but on the condition of either to refrain from making any political activities or human rights activities or to support the government. This is something we reject, and we called in the report that any committee should be independent, and any return for those activists outside should not be conditioned on their freedom of expression or their activism in the field. So this is something we make it very clearly, but we hope that the government will respond to this recommendation, and we take use of our presence here in Brussels to call upon the European Commission and the European Parliament to repeat that request to the Egyptian authorities, especially now there is assessment of the macrofinance aid given to the or loans given to the government, to the Egyptian government. So we hope that one of the requests is to establish such a national commission, which should be independent, represented by human rights defenders, genuine and independent human rights defenders, to look at cases and to facilitate the settlement of these cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the room? Comments? Okay, thank you very much. So actually, I was interested in the Belgian framework. Alexis, I don't think there have been a lot of Egyptian cases in Belgium. But perhaps would you like to comment on responses in Belgium to transnational repression and how the Belgian authorities could respond to this growing trend of transnational repression practices by Arab states like Egypt?
It's difficult for me to give a global answer on these questions, but I can rely on my experience as a lawyer and on other countries' exercises of transnational repression. Give an example of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo put on the head of opponents and journalists big amounts of money, $4 million. It's not nothing. And especially for one journalist that has fled to Europe and obtained asylum, recognized as refugee by the Belgian authorities, which is also a very big paradox in our systems when we see that our countries, European countries, continue to support foreign authoritarian regimes, Egypt, Congo, making trade with them, even selling arms, etc. But in the meantime, recognizes the status of refugee to opponents or journalists as human rights defenders. It's a bit schizophrenic. And here in the case, this journalist, he went to live outside Brussels to be more discreet, but he has been followed once he was in Brussels to his place and attacked in a Flemish small town where he was living. And what I must recognize is that the police authorities have been very effective, succeeded to arrest one of the attackers, and that the instruction judge who was requested by the prosecutor did a huge work of telephone mapping, and that they succeeded to identify 4 people involved in this attack. This attack was not directly with diplomatic personnel, but some young persons hired and paid apparently €5,000 to execute the dirty job, to either to kill him, either to severely injure him. They didn't succeed because people who were passing by could protect him. But we must salute the effective work, and that the judges the prosecutor and the instruction judge were very quickly convinced that it was a case of transnational repression. They tried to know who were the direct, how do you say, les commanditaires, who asked them to do that, and of course they keep silence, probably because the executants are afraid to give the names. But there will be a trial in front of the correctional court. This is a first step. It shows that it's important to go to the police and to explain in detail the situation, because we have a legal judicial system that is working with prosecutors, instruction judges, and an independent judicial system, which countries like Egypt unfortunately doesn't have. And so that is really important, but there should be, I think there can be some ameliorations. There should be a link between the judicial authorities and the General Commissioner for Refugees, especially when people are recognized refugees, but they're not necessarily all recognized refugee. You can have, for example, an Egyptian that is here on another basis than a refugee, family reunion, work permit, etc. But to that the police or that the judicial authorities can inform at the General Commissioner for Refugees about the situation of the home country, to objectivate the facts of repression to human rights defenders, to journalists, to whistleblowers. Because, of course, a police service or a random prosecutor cannot know about that. Maybe the only time he has been in Egypt was for holidays to do a cruise on the Nile, and he can't imagine the reality of the repression apparat of the Egyptian authorities. So this collaboration, transversal collaboration, is important, and that's what you said in the focal point of the establishment of the focal point, to ensure a better protection. In the case I mentioned of the Congolese refugee, it's a good practice, but maybe we were a bit lucky. It should be, we have to be able to count on a generalization of this effective support, protection, and repression of the authors of transnational repression.
Thank you very much. Would speakers like to make any closing remarks?
First, I want to thank all the speakers for joining us and releasing this report, and I want to thank you for a lot of things that I cannot mention here. But anyway, I think the report is a step forward. I hope that many other people who are in Europe, in Turkey, in the Gulf, who are facing transnational repression and need help, they can reach out to us or our partners. Just reach out, let us know what are the issues that you're facing, how can we help more, and then in the next year, because this is going to be regular, this is going to be annual, we will try to come closer to solving the problems of Egyptians and the diaspora. Hopefully by next year the Egyptian regime would be more flexible in order to allow Egyptians in the diaspora to go back without compromising their ideas and values, or at least give people their identity documents so they can live outside and leave Egypt happily. So thank you so much for everyone who made it and for the ones following us on the live stream. And I want to thank the team of researchers. I think we were very, very lucky in this report. With our researchers, the way that they were very devoted to write and document, this is something beyond imagination.
Thank you very much. Moataz?
Just to briefly say that this report and the emerging trend of transnational repression reflect a more deeper crisis. When I spoke about in my intervention, is a shrinking civil space in Egypt. There is no public space, actually. It is not just shrinking. Really, there is no free public space for people to participate in public affairs, for human rights activism to grow. And I just to call the EU and the international partners for Egypt that economic development or stability, social stability, will never be sustained in this country without having an independent civil society, without having right of people or securing the right of people to take part peacefully in the public affairs in the country. So we hope this report to contribute to this larger phenomena, which is the public space, and it's very important, especially that Egypt this year witnessed parliamentary elections that was not competitive and just witnessed lots of grave irregularities. So evacuating the country from civil society, from independent human rights activism will bring lots of cost, not just political, but even economically and social. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moataz. And Alexis Deswaef, would you like to make any final comments?
Just one sentence to thank the Egyptian Forum for Human Rights for this important report and this work, and tell you all my admiration for this work of defense of human rights, because we know there are risks by defending human rights when it becomes to Egypt, for what you explained in Egypt, but also abroad. So full solidarity and admiration.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.